So today we're going to be taking a look at a scenario where South Asia unites. Now, South Asia is a region that includes a lot of countries in it, like India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, and Afghanistan, as well as Sri Lanka. And formerly, a lot of these countries, minus Afghanistan and plus Myanmar, were a part of the British Raj, which was the British Empire's colony in South Asia. But what if these nations decided to unite again today? It would be a very, very diverse country, but it would be a very strong country as well. If you guys enjoyed today's video, make sure to leave a like on it and subscribe to the channel if you're new. We're around 2,000 subscribers away from 200,000 subscribers. So if you want to help us reach our goal, make sure to show some support. And let's go ahead and jump straight into this video. So South Asia has just suddenly united out of nowhere. Nobody knows how this is possible due to, first of all, India and Pakistan being in the same country. They don't like each other. But then you also throw in Afghanistan and Bangladesh. It is a big mixing pot here. But at the same time, with all of these countries uniting together under one banner, they are now probably one of the strongest countries in the world, more than likely surpassing Russia in military strength and being right behind China and the United States. This country is also a nuclear power, interestingly enough. That's India and Pakistan, who have a ton of nukes. But what would they do militarily? Because this is a war scenario. Well, it's definitely possible that they could want all of the land of the old British Raj, and thus they would try to invade and declare war on Myanmar. Truthfully, the justification for this war could be as simple as wanting to control the entirety of the Bay of Bengal, going all the way down over here to Thailand. But also, they could take the more humanitarian approach and say that they're going into Myanmar to liberate the people from the government and to stop the genocide that is ongoing here. That does end up being the justification they give for invading Myanmar, and nobody really stops them. So the troops will go in and they will easily take over the capital city of Myanmar. From here, they'll spread out to the border of China, navigating through some pretty rough terrain, but they cut Myanmar into two pieces. From here, we see specialized forces start to move into this northern area with the goal of occupying any major towns or settlements, while the main South Asian army heads south and captures this major city in the south of Myanmar. After that occurs, a few groups attempt to take over the country, claiming to be the successor of the government, but it doesn't really matter at the end of the day because, well, everyone surrenders. No, but Myanmar surrenders. And just like that, South Asia has taken out their first country. Now, once again, this is a war scenario. If South Asia were to actually unite, I don't think they would start invading all of their neighbors. But since we like to talk about war scenarios on this channel, that's exactly what we have happening. Maybe the leader of South Asia, instead of being a democratically elected leader, just kind of takes over, becomes a dictator, and then dictates this country to start invading their neighbors, to become stronger, to compete with China. There's a lot of justifications and a lot of paths that you could take to make sense of them going out and declaring war on a bunch of countries. I think the competition with China would be the most likely, though. Anyway, in this peace treaty here, we can see that South Asia annexes all of the western portion of Myanmar. So starting up here from the top, they take over the coastal areas, or the more coastal areas, and leave the inland areas over here to themselves. So Myanmar does still exist, but however, they are now landlocked and are more likely than not extremely weak enough to where they are going to attract another aggressor, this time being China. So they waste absolutely no time getting their butt kicked once again, as now another top 3 power starts to move into their territory and take over their land. Myanmar is at a very, very disadvantaged spot, and unfortunately for them, they're not going to be able to win. China will fully occupy their country, and in the following peace treaty, China will fully annex the rest of Myanmar, making some new borders down here in Southeastern Asia. Some very interesting borders, but China and South Asia now hold a very long border with each other, and that's actually probably one of the longest borders in the world, other than the one between the US and Canada. It might actually be giving it a run for its money. This is a very long border. But yeah, Myanmar no longer exists, and South Asia and China are both happy, but they are also both wary of each other because China doesn't like that a top 3 power has just appeared right under them. That kind of puts a hole in their plans, especially considering how China is trying to connect up with the Indian Ocean in real life. This puts a big hole in their plans, and now they have to go through other methods of getting there, which there honestly might not be any. South Asia is kind of hogging up all the coast over here. Anyway, we're now going to go head over here to the Middle East, where we have a random in-game event occurring. Israel has just declared war on Iran. Yeah, that's interesting. Let's be real here. Israel and Iran going to war, I mean, it's not going to happen probably, but like if it did happen, then it wouldn't be too much of a surprise, right? Well, here it actually happens. And this escalates big time because we see the proxies in Lebanon get involved, the proxies over in Yemen get involved, which leads to a few more countries getting involved, like Turkey, interestingly enough, taking the side of Israel. And no, not because they're on the side of Israel, but because Syria joined the war. And well, okay, so the Syrian government, I don't know what's going on there right now. It's kind of all over the place. Let's just say that Turkey isn't too happy, and Turkey joins the war despite Syria, who joined the war on the side of Iran, who previously would have joined anyway because of government, but the government changed, so now they're less likely to join, but they're going to join anyway. Is that we picking up what I'm putting down here? I made it up. But with this Middle Eastern war rapidly getting worse and worse as Saudi Arabia joins to take on Yemen, South Asia is also going to make a decision. And, well, the decision's already been kind of made. They're already colored in red, but just to make it official, South Asia joins the war on the side of the red team. And I know, there's a ton of people in South Asia that would not want to help out Israel, but India does have the largest population center in the South Asian country, meaning they probably have the most representation. And also, India likes Israel, so I think it kind of works out. Just a lot of internal dismay with the decision to help out Israel in the war. But nonetheless, South Asia joins the war against Persia, or Iran. I don't know why I called them Persia. And the blue team is in for one heck of a time in this war because, well, the red team is very clearly way more powerful than the blue team is. Lebanon is wiped out by Israeli forces, and then they start to carnage right into Syria. And the Turks do the same in the north. And this very fragile country falls extremely quickly. Back down south, we see the Saudi Arabians enter into Yemen and take their capital city. Saudi Arabia is more likely than not being helped out by like the United States right here. The US and some other Western nations definitely have a lot of interest in this region pertaining to the Red Sea and the strait through here. The Houthi have been blowing up boats. So maybe this war has a little bit more of a foreign importance, but not enough to impact the fact that the red team would still overpower Iran. It would just take a little bit of time because Iran, I mean, they're not like a weak country. They would fight back and they would fight back pretty well. It's just, eventually they would be overwhelmed. And that's what we see when the red team captures the capital, Tehran, over here near the Caspian Sea. Okay, that was pretty easy. South Asia will send some more troops up the Persian Gulf and take over all of the coastal areas, and it's at this point that we finally see Iran surrender over to the red team. So that Middle Eastern war was very short-lived, and it went very well for the red team. But now we can take a look at the peace treaty of Baghdad. And in this treaty, we can see that Syria is divided up a lot. In fact, they probably wouldn't be able to survive at this point. Syria would be extremely weak and probably would have to unite with either Iraq or Jordan, or maybe they would be completely occupied by Turkey. But moving down south to Saudi Arabia, we can see that they take over the entirety of the western port of Yemen, so they now control the strait right here that is very important to the Red Sea. And then finally, moving over here to Iran, we see that South Asia takes over the entire southeastern quadrant of this country, which when fully annexed looks something like this. So South Asia, very, very large country at this point, spanning all the way over from the Persian Gulf to like the entrance to the Strait of Malacca, which is crazy. A very vast country, so to fix that, they're going to start to try to go north, and they will be invading another country, this time going to be Tajikistan. Now, what has Tajikistan done to warrant invasion by South Asia? I couldn't tell you. I don't even know what the justification for this war would be. What does Tajikistan have that South Asia wants, resource-wise? Good question. I don't know. But they will be annexing all of this land from Tajikistan, so interestingly enough, they don't actually fully annex the country. They do leave it to live, although extremely small and extremely weak, and definitely vulnerable to foreign invasion by countries like Uzbekistan or the Kyrgyzstan, the Kyrgyz. All right, updated border map. This is looking pretty cool. You can definitely see the geographical boundary that this country is being bounded by. Well, also, they don't want to invade China, but the Himalaya mountains that are like curving the border of this country over here. Otherwise, they would probably try to expand over here if it wasn't China, but it is China, so probably shouldn't touch that. Oh, I mean, okay, sure. South Asia will now declare war on China. Yeah, they think they're ready. Are they ready? Probably not. China's the second strongest country in the world, one of the largest economies in the world. South Asia, probably not so much to that level just yet, but at least they have some allies. A few of them, actually. We have Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, the Philippines, and Vietnam all joining the war on the side of South Asia. This has been something that all of these nations have been working together to eventually fulfill and to have happen. China will call North Korea into the war, but they are unable to get any other country involved. And as it turns out, this stems from a geopolitical shift in the world, now seeing South Asia as the future of exporting trade rather than China. Currently, China is very favored by trade partners around the world because of its high population numbers and ability to export a ton of stuff. But at the same time, countries aren't too favorable, at least Western countries aren't too favorable of the communist dictatorship in China. But with South Asia uniting and forming this very, very large country, South Asia now becomes the more preferable target for Western countries and maybe even non-Western democratic countries to trade with this region of the world where there's a ton of population and a ton of exporting ability. Now, I did say at the beginning of the video that this country could have also promoted a dictator, had someone come in and just take the seat of power. But in order for this particular war to actually happen and for the justification of all these other red countries to get involved, we would need this country to have a democratically elected leader. So let's go ahead and say that they've either changed their ways or they never had a dictator in the first place. Now the world is seeing South Asia as the primary target for trade and want to replace China in that manner. So most of the world is backing the red team in this war, and that's why we didn't see anyone else join on the side of China. This is a perfect opportunity to get rid of the authoritative government here and to replace it with a much more democratic government. South Asia will begin to send troops across the border of Myanmar into former Burmese territory, telling their troops to head straight towards the first major Chinese city, which is exactly where they're heading, right over here to the north of Vietnam's border. Speaking of Vietnam, they're also invading into China, although their invasion goes a lot worse than South Asia's because this is core Chinese territory and the Chinese military is setting up here and defending. So Vietnam's forces are able to do this, but immediately after, they are starting to get pushed back already. Up north on the Korean peninsula, South Korea definitely knew that North Korea was going to get involved, so they had their armies ready as they send them into North Korean territory and start to near towards Pyongyang. Following this event, we have the nuking of Seoul a few times. 3 nuclear bombs hit Seoul, 2 hit over here in Japan, and the rest that North Korea fired off either hit themselves in multiple areas or land in the ocean. North Korea has just started a nuclear war, and having nuked South Korea, well, Uncle Sam isn't going to like that. Let's just say that. Oh yeah, not at all. The United States starts a nuclear barrage into North Korean territory, wiping out anything that remains. And they also join the war effort, so that's fun. Now, will this nuclear war evolve into anything else between South Asia and China? It very well could, but the decision is eventually made that we're not going to nuke each other because that would just kill everybody and that would negate the whole purpose of this war. So China, South Asia, and the United States all sign an agreement promising to not nuke each other. Very nice of them. Now, I do want to clarify, though, the United States didn't join the war on the side of the red team. They joined the war on the side of South Korea against North Korea. That does kind of lead to some complicated, stuff like, hey, is the United States at war with China? Is the United States helping out South Asia? But no, they're not. They're only helping out South Korea, invading North Korea, and that's exactly what they've done, and also hence why they only nuked North Korea and didn't nuke, China, for example. Now, when North Korea is completely occupied by Korean and American forces, they'll make an agreement with China saying, hey, well, we're going to pull South Korea and Japan out of the war, and in exchange for that, you're going to leave North Korea to us, and China is going to take that offer because at this point, China is at a very disadvantaged spot, and having these 2 countries out of the war against them would be very beneficial. So East Asia leaves the war and leaves China alone. Korea will fully annex North Korea, and the US is also no longer involved in East Asia. Now it is just a war between South Asia, Vietnam, Taiwan, the Philippines, and China. As you can already see, Chinese forces have beat back Vietnamese forces and are now chasing them back into their country, heading straight for their capital city down here. Back over on this front line, things are still going well for South Asia, especially considering they have just captured this major city from China and are now heading straight towards Vietnam's border, in which they finally reach and encircle this area over here, where any remaining Chinese military members will flee into Laos. Back over here on the coast of Taiwan, we see a Chinese naval landing made, one that takes over one major city and cuts the island into 2 pieces. Following this, a few more naval landings are made here and there, but at the end of the day, Taiwan will be unable to defend themselves from the superior Chinese Navy and superior Chinese military, and they will be occupied by China for now. Back over in Vietnam, an influx of troops from South Asia and the Philippines means that pushing back China here is definitely going to be possible, if it lets me. Hello? All right, there we go. Chinese troops are pushed back, and then it eventually stops because there's now a stalemate between them and China. Back over here, South Asian forces are being pushed back even more. They are unable to stop the not maybe superior military of South Asia, but definitely the more manpower-y kind of military, manpower-y kind of military, the military with a lot of manpower, let's just call it that. A lot more than China, and they could definitely do the old Soviet method of just throwing out troops on the front line, which might be what they're doing here. But yeah, just the sheer number of troops that is invading into China is definitely not very defendable unless you break a few treaties that were made in Geneva, but I don't know if China wants to do that and warrant an international response. But yeah, South Asia is dominating China in this war to the surprise of pretty much everybody. They'll now help out Vietnam a little bit more and take over this major city, and very closely they're getting to some very important areas of China, and more specifically this area right here. You don't want to get this lost. That would be very bad for China. But at the same time, as you can see, things aren't going so well down here. The red team has taken over a ton of territory. Oh! And to make things even worse, Tibet has just broken away from China, declaring their independence from the nation and wanting to reestablish their sovereignty. They have the full backing of not only South Asia, but tons of other countries across the world, more particularly Western countries, because they want to spite China. But you know, Tibet being independent is popular in countries that aren't actually countries, like Somaliland and over here in Kosovo. Well, Kosovo kind of is a country. They have international recognition, whereas Somaliland has none. And then there's Taiwan, who is most certainly a country just without recognition thanks to China, but maybe that's changing here in this timeline. Oh, it definitely could be. We now see Xinjiang break away from China along with Tibet, and China has now lost all of their westernmost regions. Now, granted, these regions aren't super strong. There's not a whole lot lost by China when losing these two large areas, but it does still kind of promote insurgency, and maybe will kind of cause for a democratic coalition to pop up, maybe. We'll see. For now, though, South Asia will have a ton of alleviation with these two countries joining, and they can now only focus on southern China, and that's a very good thing, because like I was saying earlier, there's a very important area down here near Hong Kong that China will not want to lose. However, South Asian troops are rapidly approaching. They'll eventually isolate this little island down here, and well, they'll take it. They'll beat back the Chinese Navy somehow. I'm not sure if they would actually be able to do that. We're going to assume they do, though, because it's pink now. So yes, they did. All right, Hong Kong, Macau, and all the other major cities here, they are being ridden up on. However, China will finally get its head out of the sand, and they will be pushing back these South Asians away from this area. Very important, and they want to make sure they don't lose it. So they set up a defensive front that looks something like this, very far away from these major cities. At the same time, they also have counteroffensives up north here, pushing back against these major cities over here, recapturing them, and liberating the people. As they call it, you know, it's the People's Liberation Army. But now we see Xinjiang start to invade in the Chinese territory. This is interesting because I don't think these countries or regions or breakaway regions would want to do this. They'd more so want to just rely on South Asia taking out China and then, you know, them declaring and getting their independence. But maybe the stride to take down China is strong enough to make these breakaway regions form an army that is capable of pushing into PRC territory. But yeah, they're going to invade the Gobi Desert. It's going to be very hard to do, but you know what? They do it because Xinjiang is like that. Anyway, they will finally be stopped by the main Chinese army, who is defending this belt kind of area like this. They want to keep them out of the more populated areas of China. They're okay with what they've lost so far. All right, so the Democratic Coalition has appeared. People in China are no longer happy with the communist government due to the lack of competence, and well, as you can see here, they've been getting invaded pretty badly. So these regions will break away. There's an entire province that break away, but also what we see is a few major cities rise up, and they take some portions of their provinces with them. And then this one major city down here was like, you know what? Yeah, let's get out of here. This puts a huge hole in the plan of the Chinese because now they have to defend and invade into this breakaway territory. But unfortunately, these guys are stacked with weapons, and I wonder who could be supplying the insurgents in China. Surely not the US. Surely that wouldn't be a foreign policy goal of the United States, right? Yeah, no. Oh, Taiwan's breaking away. The occupation army stationed in Chinese Taipei, as I like to call it, well, they get their butts kicked by the Republic of China's forces, which have been kind of dormant, waiting for the perfect opportunity. As it turns out, these guys are identifying themselves with the Republic of China, so this would be Taiwan should they be victorious. And will they be victorious? Well, more likely than not, yes, because South Asia has just reached all the way over to meet up with them, cutting off this major area down here from Chinese forces, who will do their utmost best to push back down here, taking this major city. but this South Asian army just has way too many troops for them to push back into, and eventually they will start to take over these cities and they will capture the entire thing. A huge economic loss for China, who at this point is trying to focus on taking back as much of their own territory as possible. Might not be too possible though, because South Asia has now linked completely up with the rebels in China, and they are directly supplying them not only with resources but their own military, which allows for these rebellions to kind of keep the Chinese military at bay. They push them out of their breakaway regions, and eventually we have yet another province declaring their independence. This time though, it's the remainder of this very large province here. But they kind of fortify themselves as a supporter in the war against China, which will now link up the entirety of this movement over here in the southeastern portion of China. But the occurrence of that happening just fuels more and more of these provinces to rise up and break away from China, wanting to establish a democratic government with the Taiwanese, who they feel at this point should definitely be the ruler over the Chinese people, not the communists. China has lost some very important population areas, and with the people rising up, the military has also begun to lose morale, oftentimes kind of defecting the Chinese military and joining in on these local militaries, who at this point are doing a lot of damage. And yeah, China is falling. They are now collapsing. The war continues on for a few more months until eventually the Chinese government will make the decision to surrender over to not only South Asia, but also over to the Republic of China forces, Xinjiang, and Tibet. That means it's a victory for the red team and all the allies, and we can take a look at this peace treaty. And this peace treaty is pretty simple. So we have Tibet and Xinjiang getting their full-on independence. They'll be recognized by the international community. We have South Asia annexing this large chunk of land over here. So this is like mostly the rest of Myanmar, but also there is a little bit of Chinese territory here. So this will all come over to South Asia like that, and these guys are huge. Apart from that though, we see that the Republic of China is reestablished, so Taiwan kind of takes control over this. I'm not sure if the capital would be over here in Taipei or if it would be in like the mainland China area, maybe in like Shanghai. But moving south of that, we see Vietnam gets a little bit of land, and then the communist government does still exist here. However, they are extremely weakened, and yeah, this would definitely change up geopolitical concepts a lot. This would be huge for the world. This would be world changing. And let's just say the focus would shift from Beijing over here to South Asia. These guys would be the new I guess dominant trade force in the world. Everyone would be coming here to do their industries and their business, similar to how a lot of companies do their industries and business in China right now. That's now switching over to these guys. So these guys very quickly would become like the second strongest country in the world. And if they could build a strong enough military and you know, kind of develop their economy to the point where of China and the United States, then maybe they could even take over the USA. It's definitely possible, and they would definitely be on the trajectory to do so. It's just a matter of how long they would take. Anyway, that is going to do it for today's video on what if South Asia united. Now, I know that this isn't like, when you search up what if South Asia united, not always are people going to be looking for war scenarios. So I do recognize that, which is why I always try to give a little bit more information on like what the country would be like. So, you know, for example, it would be the third strongest country in the world. It would have one of the top economies in the world, one of the top militaries in the world. I do like to give like subtle information on that if it isn't obvious, just in case people are like, wait, why is this whole video a war scenario? But yeah, all my videos are like that. So I mean, if you're new around here, then welcome. But also, if you're new around here, make sure to subscribe. We're getting super close to 200,000 subscribers, around 2,000 away. Yeah, that is going to do it for the video though. So I hope you guys did enjoy. Once again, if you did, like I just said, make sure to show some support. When we hit like 199,500 or maybe like 800, I'll go live on the channel, hoping to capture the moment we hit 200K live. Hopefully that isn't like in the middle of the night, and hopefully I'm not in classes. I'll try to work around it. But yeah, hope you guys are excited for that. Got a lot of things planned for 200K, and I hope to see you guys in the next video. Once again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you then. And of course, thank you to all our super fans. This includes Aiden Shank, Icy Static FN, See What I Do, I Ain't Lying, Pro, CTG on YT, Euroball, Bren, Jazzy Jerboa, Green France Mapping, Nevada Garbage Trucks, Vista, Knighthood 7353, and Golden Ball Mapping, Ozgeo, Ixco, Augusto, A Norwegian, RS, Gail Martinez, Zaylance, Polly Edits, Laser Taze, Pablo Sigma Cat, Strider X, Hammertoad 45, and DW Cool Dude. Once again, thank you guys.